They say the West has three things that kill a man fastest: rattlesnakes in the dark, stray bullets with no name on them, and debts you never knew you owed. That night, I got all three. 9 years back, in a place called Dead Man's Canyon, my brother Ezra took three bullets meant for me. I can still see it clear as yesterday. The dust rising around us, the crack of rifles echoing off red stone walls, the way his blood soaked through my shirt as I held him in the dirt. His last words weren't about revenge or getting even. He looked up at me with eyes already going dim and whispered, "Don't waste your life hunting ghosts, Colt. But don't let others die when you can stop it." I buried him there under a crooked mesquite tree, carved a cross from scrap wood, said words I can't remember anymore. Then I rode away from everything I knew, away from the badge, the guns for hire work, the trail crews and wagon trains. Found myself a patch of hard ground at Iron Ridge, built a cabin from salvaged lumber, and told myself I was done with other people's trouble. For 9 years, I kept that promise. Lived alone, spoke to no one unless I had to. Let the desert wind and the silence be my only company. Until the night three riders came out of the dusk, dragging something behind them that barely looked human anymore. That night, everything changed. The sun was dropping behind the western ridge, painting the sky blood red, when I heard them coming. I was splitting firewood behind the cabin, and the rhythm of hooves on hardpan carried different that evening. Not the steady beat of men with purpose, not the careful pace of scouts. This was something else, unsteady, careless, the kind of riding drunk men do when they think nobody's watching. I set down the axe and waited. Three riders emerged through the scrub brush and Palo Verde trees. Their horses were lathered white with sweat, sides heaving, nostrils flared. The men looked worse. Dust caked their clothes. Whiskey fumes rolled off them, even at 20 yards. And something else, the smell of cruelty, thick and rotten. The one in front had a scar that split his face from forehead to jaw, running straight through a dead white eye. The second sat tall in a stolen cavalry coat, brass buttons tarnished black with old blood. The third swayed in his saddle like a ship in rough seas, a bottle hanging loose from one hand. The scarred one raised a hand like we were old neighbors meeting at church. "Evening, Brennan. We come to collect what's owed." I didn't answer. Men who arrive uninvited usually bring excuses or demands, and I wasn't interested in either. "That bay mare of yours," he continued, voice rough like gravel under wagon wheels. "Sierra, pretty horse. She's ours for the supply work last spring. We hauled goods through Apache country to your door. Dangerous work. Boss man sent us to collect payment." I'd never hired these men, never seen them before in my life, but I knew what happened to men who argued with guns they couldn't see. "I don't owe you anything," I said, keeping my voice flat and empty. The scarred one, they called him Scar Maddox, grinned with teeth that hadn't seen soap in months. He jerked his head toward the third rider, and that's when I saw it. The rope, trailing from the saddle horn, stretching back into the dust, was a woman. She was Apache, maybe 27, 28 years old. Long black hair hung in matted tangles, stuck to her face with sweat and dried blood. Her deerskin dress had been torn at the shoulder and chest, exposing bruised skin in the curve of one breast. The fabric was shredded down one side, showing rope burns and cuts on her ribs. Her feet were bare, soles cut to bloody ribbons from being dragged. Rope circled her wrists like red bracelets, the skin beneath swollen and weeping. But it was her eyes that stopped me cold. Not broken, not pleading, just exhausted beyond measure, yet still defiant, still human, still fighting even when fighting seemed impossible. She stumbled forward when the horse stopped, caught herself with bound hands and didn't cry out, didn't beg, just stood there swaying, breathing in shallow gasps, forcing her legs to stay straight when they wanted to buckle. Caught her stealing near Red Canyon 3 days back, Scar said, voice casual like he was discussing cattle. Army don't want her. Figured you might. Boss says you keep the girl, we take the mare. Fair trade. Nobody argues, nobody bleeds. Fair. I looked at the woman, then at the three men. The cavalry coat had his hand near his revolver. The drunk one had a shotgun across his saddle, half-cocked and ready. Scar's good eye never left my face, reading me, calculating whether I'd be stupid enough to fight. I could refuse, pull the Winchester from inside the door and tell them to ride out. But that meant 3 armed men, drunk and angry, in my yard at dusk. It meant a burning cabin, a shallow grave, another death on land that had seen too much killing already. I'd survived 9 years by knowing which fights to take and which to let pass by like storm clouds on the horizon. Take the mare, I said. Leave her here, then ride. Scar's grin widened into something ugly. Now that's what I call smart thinking. They dismounted, boots hitting dirt hard. 2 of them untied Sierra from the corral, beautiful animal with a copper coat and white blaze, strong legs that could run all day. I'd raised her from a filly, gentled her myself. Watching her go hurt something deep in my chest, but I kept my face empty as stone. The drunk one staggered over to the woman and untied the rope from his saddle horn. He dragged her to my fence post and looped the rope around the weathered wood, pulling it tight enough to jerk her forward. She caught herself on bound hands and stayed upright. Didn't fall. Didn't give them that satisfaction. If she dies here, Scar said, mounting up with my horse, you can bury her or leave her for the coyotes. We don't give a damn either way. Your problem now, Brennan. They rode off into the gathering dark, trailing dust and laughter behind them. Sierra went with them, head high, not understanding she'd been traded like property. I stood there for a full minute after they disappeared. The woman's breathing was the only sound besides wind through the creosote and the distant creak of rope against wood. I turned and walked into the cabin. Inside, I poured water from the bucket and drank half. Told myself she wasn't my responsibility. Fort Hays Cavalry Patrol rode through here twice a week. They'd find her, take her to the reservation or wherever the Army put captured Apache women. Not my problem. Not my debt to pay. I'd done my part by not getting killed over a horse. I sliced salt pork and ate it slow, chewing each bite like it mattered, trying not to hear her breathing outside. But Ezra's voice kept echoing in my head. Don't let others die when you can stop it. An hour passed. The air turned cold the way desert nights do, burning you during the day, freezing you after dark. Coyotes started their evening song, closer than usual. Probably smelled blood, probably circling already, waiting. I tried to lie down. Couldn't. Sat on the edge of the bed and felt something twist in my chest, anger or guilt, or just the weight of being alive when better men were dead. I cursed once, low and vicious, then stood up. Outside, the stars were coming out. Cold wind pushed through my shirt. I walked to the fence post without hurrying, each step feeling heavier than the last. She didn't see me coming until I touched the rope. Then every muscle in her body went rigid, tense for another blow, another cruelty. Her skin was fever hot when my hand brushed her arm. I saw the full damage then, the soles of her feet split open and bleeding into the dirt. Rope burns on her wrists that had scabbed over with dried blood, bruises layering her ribs in shades of purple and yellow. I cut the rope with my hunting knife. Her arms dropped forward and she swayed like a tree in wind. I caught her before she hit the ground. She weighed less than I expected, all tension and bone wrapped in torn buckskin and sweat and pain. She didn't fight, didn't speak. Her eyes were half open but unfocused, seeing something far away. I'm not keeping you, I said quietly, more to convince myself than her. Just until you can walk, then you go. I carried her inside. Her head rested against my chest, black hair sticking to my shirt with sweat and blood. The torn dress slipped further, but I kept my eyes forward, focused on getting her to the cot. Later on the narrow bed my brother used to sleep in, pulled a wool blanket over her shoulders, tucked it around her carefully. In the lamplight, I saw everything they'd done. Bruises on her ribs, purple and yellow and green. A deep cut on her thigh, crusted with dirt. Swelling at both wrists where the rope had cut down to bone. Her breathing came shallow and fast, the way people breathe when their body's trying to shut down and keep going at the same time. I fetched a tin cup of water and set it near the bed. Thought about asking her name, where she came from, who might be looking for her. But she was already unconscious, gone somewhere pain couldn't follow. I sat in the chair and stared at the floor, told myself she'd leave as soon as she could stand. I wouldn't get involved, wouldn't ask questions, wouldn't let this become another weight I carried through empty years. But I didn't lie down, didn't sleep. I stayed awake, listening to make sure she kept breathing, watching the rise and fall of the blanket, waiting for dawn. The night stayed quiet except for wind against wood and the sound of someone I never planned to save, trying not to die in my dead brother's bed. When she finally spoke, just before dawn broke gray over the eastern ridge, her voice came out broken and rough like stone scraping stone. "Why? You help?" I looked at her, dark eyes watching me with no trust, no hope, no fear. Just bone-deep exhaustion and the faint ember of something that might have been curiosity. "Because I'm tired of digging graves," I said. She nodded once, like that made sense in whatever language pain speaks. Then her eyes closed again, and she slipped back into sleep. I stood and walked outside as the sun came up. That's when I saw them. 3 arrows, stuck in the ground in a perfect line, 10 feet from my door. Apache arrows fletched with hawk feathers and painted with red ochre war paint. Not a warning, a countdown. They knew she was here. They'd been watching, and soon they'd come. I looked at the arrows, then back at the cabin where a woman I didn't know slept in my brother's bed. "Hell," I said to the empty desert. The trouble I'd spent 9 years avoiding had just walked through my door, and there was no walking away from it now. For 2 days, she barely moved. Fever came and went in waves that left her skin burning hot, then shaking with cold. I kept her on the cot, changed the bandages twice a day with strips torn from an old shirt, made her drink water even when she tried to push the cup away. Didn't talk much. She didn't either. We existed in a silence that felt safer than words. On the 3rd morning, everything shifted. I was at the table, cleaning my Remington revolver piece by piece when I heard the blanket rustle. She sat up slowly, testing her body like it was something borrowed and unfamiliar. The shirt I'd given her, one of Ezra's old ones, hung loose on her frame, sleeves rolled past her elbows. She'd tried to braid her hair, but it was still tangled in places, matted with old blood. She looked at me. I looked back. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. "You got a name?" I finally asked. "Chenoa. I'm Colt Brennan." She nodded slowly, filing the information away somewhere behind those dark eyes. Then she said something that surprised me. "You have coffee?" I almost smiled. Almost. "Yeah, I got coffee." I poured her a cup, black and bitter. She took it in both hands, still bandaged at the wrists, and sipped carefully. Made a face like it tasted worse than expected, but kept drinking anyway. "You leave when you can walk," I said. Not cruel, just stating the way things were. "Men come back," she said. Her English was broken, but clear enough. "Then they'll bleed," I said. She studied me over the rim of the tin cup, deciding if I meant it or if I was just another man making promises that wouldn't hold weight when tested. We sat like that for a while. Her drinking coffee that was probably too hot, me reassembling the revolver with practiced hands. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable anymore. Just careful, like two wild animals sharing water at the same hole, neither sure if the other would bite. On the fourth day, she told me who she was. We were sitting outside in the evening shade, watching the sun paint the western ridge in shades of orange and red. I'd brought her a plate of beans and cornbread. Simple food, nothing fancy, but she ate it like it was the finest meal she'd ever tasted, chewed slowly, carefully, making each bite count. When she finished, she set the plate down gently and spoke without looking at me. My father is Ahiga, chief of Redstone Apache. I kept my face neutral, but my stomach dropped like a stone down a well. Chief's daughter. That changed everything. That turned this from a simple act of mercy into something that could get me killed a dozen different ways. She continued, voice steady. 12 days ago, soldiers come to our camp near Waterpass. Dawn raid. They burn lodges, kill 6 warriors. I hide in rocks with other women and children. When I come out 3 days later for water, she paused, searching for words. 3 white men catch me, put rope on me like dog. The ones who brought you here, she nodded. They say they sell me to soldier at Fort Hayes for $500 gold. Good price for chief's daughter, but soldiers say no. Too much trouble with Apache if I disappear. So her jaw tightened. They trade me to you, for horse. They said I owed them for supply work last spring, I said, but I never hired them. Never saw them before that night. You not owe them, she said, looking at me directly now. They lie. Boss man tell them bring me here. He want you dead but not by his hand. The pieces started falling into place. Boss man got a name? Her expression darkened. They call him Malachi. Big scar on face, here to here. She traced a line from her forehead down to her jaw. The world stopped spinning for a second. Malachi Cross. I hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 9 years. Hadn't let myself think it. Kept it buried deep where old ghosts belonged. But now it was here, sitting 3 feet from me in the Arizona dust, real and solid and dangerous as a loaded gun. You know him, Chenoa said. Not a question, a statement of fact. He killed my brother 9 years back, I said. My voice came out flat and empty. Ambushed a wagon train we were guarding. Ezra took 3 bullets meant for me. I put one through Malachi's face before everything went dark. Thought I killed him. Guess I didn't finish the job. She absorbed this without visible reaction. Just nodded once, filing it away. He want you dead, she said simply. He know my people find me here with white man. They kill you first, ask questions after. He laugh while you die. Clean revenge. She was right. It was a trap, carefully laid. Malachi knew where I lived. Probably had known for years, just waited for the right moment. Knew the Apache would track their chief's daughter. Knew they'd assume the worst when they found her in a white man's cabin. When they killed me, Malachi would have his revenge without firing a shot or risking his neck. Smart. Vicious. The kind of thing he was good at. Your father sent warriors to find you, I said. Yes, they watch already. I see arrows outside. 3 arrows mean 3 days warning. Tomorrow or next day they come. I could send her out right now. Tell her to walk toward those arrows. Let her people take her home. I'd be clear of it. But Malachi's men would come back either way, and next time they'd bring more than rope and threats. I'm not running, I said. She looked at me with something that might have been respect. Then you die. My people see me here. They think you take me. They kill you slow. Maybe, I said, but Malachi used you to trap me. I don't run from traps. I burn them down and walk through the ashes. Something flickered in her eyes then. Not quite a smile, but close. The 5th day, everything went to hell. I'd gone hunting that morning, tracking a mule deer about a mile east of the cabin. The trail was fresh, hoof prints still sharp in the dust. I was lining up the shot when I heard it, faint but unmistakable, the sound of horses at my cabin. I ran back, Winchester in hand, heart hammering. Two horses I didn't recognize were tied near my fence. The cabin door stood open. I heard voices inside, one male, rough and familiar. Then Chenoa's voice, sharp with anger. I approached quiet, boots soft on hard ground, and peered through the window. Scar Maddox stood in the middle of my cabin, left hand gripping Chenoa's hair, yanking her head back. His right hand held a knife pressed against her throat, hard enough to draw blood. Behind him stood a thick-set man with a matted beard, holding a shotgun pointed at nothing in particular, but ready to swing it anywhere needed. "Easy. Brennan," Scar said without turning around. Somehow he'd known I was there. "We just come to reclaim our property. Boss man says the mayor died of colic 2 days after we left. So we're taking the girl back to even things out." A thin line of blood ran down Chenoa's neck where the knife pressed. But her eyes found mine through the window, and they weren't afraid. They were waiting, watching, ready. I saw it then, the small blade hidden in her right hand, the one I'd left on the table for cutting food. She'd palmed it when they grabbed her, kept it concealed, waited for the right moment. Smart woman. I stepped through the door slow and easy, Winchester lowered, but ready. "Let her go, Scar." "Can't do that," he said. "Boss wants her back. Says he's got a new buyer up at—" Chenoa moved like lightning. She drove the small blade upward and back, sinking it into Scar's thigh just above the knee. He screamed, high and shrill like a wounded horse, and stumbled backward, releasing her hair. The bearded man swung his shotgun toward her, but I was already moving. Slammed the Winchester barrel into his face with everything I had. His nose exploded in a spray of blood and broken cartilage. He dropped like a sack of grain, shotgun clattering across the floor. Scar was still screaming, trying to yank the blade out of his leg. Blood poured between his fingers, soaking his pants. I grabbed him by the collar and half dragged, half threw him toward the door. He stumbled outside, leaving a blood trail like a wounded animal. The bearded man, I heard Scar call him Reuben, crawled after his boss, whimpering through his shattered face. I followed them out, Winchester aimed at Scar's chest. "Next time you come to my land," I said, voice cold and flat as Winterstone, "I put bullets in you instead of bruises. And the time after that, I put you in the ground. We clear?" Scar nodded, face white with pain and fear. They managed to mount their horses barely and rode off slow, weaving in their saddles like drunk men at midnight. When the dust settled, I turned back to the cabin. Chenoa stood in the doorway, blood on her hands. Scar's blood, not hers. She looked at me with those dark eyes and said something I hadn't expected. "Thank you. You saved me twice now." "Don't thank me yet," I said. "They'll come back. And next time, they'll bring everyone." That night we didn't sleep. I sat by the window, Winchester across my lap, watching the darkness for movement. Chenoa sat on the floor near the door, that small blade still in her hand. Cleaned of blood, but ready for more. Around midnight I heard them. Not horses, not boots on hard ground. Just the whisper of moccasins moving in a circle around the cabin, soft as wind through grass. The Apache had arrived. When dawn came up red and angry over the eastern ridge, 6 warriors stood in my yard, with arrows notched and bowstrings pulled tight. The sun came up slow that morning, painting the desert in shades of blood and copper. I stepped out first, hands empty, rifle left inside where it wouldn't look like provocation. Chenoa tried to follow, but I held up one hand. She stayed in the doorway where they could see her but couldn't reach her yet. 6 Apache warriors formed a semicircle 20 yards out. They wore buckskin leggings and nothing else, chests painted with ochre and ash in patterns that meant war. 3 held bows with arrows notched and ready. 2 carried old rifles, probably taken from dead soldiers or traded for at some frontier post. One, the oldest, held a war club studded with metal spikes that looked like they'd tasted blood before. The old one stepped forward, maybe 50 years old, face weathered by wind and sun and hard living, lines carved deep around his eyes and mouth. "I am Kitchi," he said in English that was better than mine. "Brother to Chief Ahiga. That woman is blood of my blood, daughter of my brother. You will give her to us now, or you will die where you stand." "She's not mine to give," I said, keeping my voice steady. "She's free to go whenever she wants." "You lie." This came from the younger warrior beside Kitchi, maybe 30 years old, with Chenoa's same fierce eyes. "White men always lie. You take her as slave, use her, trade her like horse. I see rope marks. I see bruises. You die for this." "Neetis," Chenoa started, but he cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Sister, be silent. We come to bring you home. This man dies for touching you." "He did not." "Silent." Nidus's voice cracked like a whip. "You speak when I tell you to speak." I kept my eyes on Kitchi. He was the one who mattered. The others would follow his lead, for good or ill. "3 white men brought her here 5 days ago," I said, speaking slowly and clearly. "Dragged her behind a horse like an animal. Left her tied to my fence to die. I cut her loose. Gave her water, food, medicine. Fought off 2 men who came back to take her again yesterday. That's the truth. Ask her if you don't believe me." Kitchi's expression remained unreadable, hard as iron and twice as unyielding. "You expect us to believe this?" "I expect you to ask her what happened and listen to her answer." Chenoa stepped out of the cabin then, moving carefully on feet that were still healing. The shirt I'd given her hung loose but decent. The bandage on her neck showed where Scar's knife had drawn blood yesterday. Her wrists still bore the marks of rope burns, visible even from 20 yards. She spoke in Apache first, rapid and emphatic, gesturing toward me, and then toward the trail where Scar and Reuben had fled. Kitchi's expression shifted slightly, just a flicker, but enough to show he was listening. Nidus shook his head, refusing to accept it, jaw clenched tight with anger and pride. Then Chenoa switched to English, looking directly at her brother. "He saved my life, Nidus. Twice. The men who took me, they came back yesterday to take me again for their boss. He fought them, made them bleed. He could have let me die that first night, could have used me like they wanted him to. But he did not. He gave me his brother's bed, treated my wounds like I was—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Like I was human, not property." "White men lie," Nidus said again, but there was less certainty in his voice now. "I do not lie," Chenoa said. "And he—" The rifle shot cracked across the desert like thunder. One of the Apache warriors spun and fell, a hole in his chest blooming red. He hit the ground and didn't move. Then the world exploded into chaos and gunfire. From the ridge south of my cabin, 6 more shots rang out in rapid succession. Another warrior took a bullet in the shoulder and went down hard. The rest scattered, diving behind rocks and scrub brush, arrows flying wild. I saw them then, coming hard down the slope in a cloud of dust. Malachi Cross and 6 men, riding like demons unleashed from hell itself. I recognized Scar Maddox even at a distance, his leg bandaged from yesterday but still in the saddle. Pike Renner in his stolen cavalry coat, rifle already firing. Dutch Kane swaying drunk but dangerous, and 3 others I'd never seen. Hard men with new rifles and dead eyes. Hired guns brought in special for this. Leading them all was Malachi on a coal-black horse, wearing a long leather coat that flapped behind him like dark wings. Even at 100 yards I recognized him. The ruined face, the white line of scar tissue running from brow to chin where my bullet had marked him 9 years ago. "Kill the Apaches first," Malachi's voice carried across the desert like a sermon from hell. Brennan stays alive. I want him to watch his new friends die. His men opened fire. Modern Winchesters, repeating rifles that could pour lead like rain. The Apache had bows and two old single-shot rifles. It was a massacre waiting to happen. Kitchi screamed orders in Apache. His warriors returned fire, but arrows don't match bullets at distance. One of the hired guns, young, blonde, eager, shot another Apache warrior point blank as the man tried to rush him with a hatchet. The warrior went down and didn't rise. I ran back inside the cabin, grabbed my Winchester and gun belt, strapped them on fast. Chenoa was right behind me, eyes fierce. Give me rifle, she said. You know how to shoot? My father teach all his children to fight. Give me rifle now. I handed her Ezra's old Henry rifle from the wall rack. She checked the chamber with practiced hands, levered around, nodded once. We came back out shooting. I aimed for the closest rider, Pike Renner in his cavalry coat. My first shot took him high in the chest, just below the collarbone. He jerked backward, tried to stay in the saddle, failed, fell hard and lay still in the dust. Chenoa fired at one of the hired guns, missed, levered another round smooth as silk, fired again. This time the man grabbed his arm and veered off, blood streaming. Malachi's gang split up, trying to flank us from two sides, but they'd made a critical mistake. They'd given the Apache time to regroup and take cover. Kitchi shouted something sharp and commanding. The four remaining warriors, himself Nidus, and two others, rushed forward in a zigzag pattern, too fast to track easily, using every rock and bush for cover. Two carried hatchets that gleamed red with war paint. One had his war club. Nidus had a bow and a face full of killing fury. Dutch Kane came at them, rifle raised, whiskey brave, and stupid. Nidus was faster. He launched his hatchet in a smooth, practiced arc. It spun end over end through the morning air and buried itself deep in Dutch's throat. The drunk man's eyes went wide with surprise. He toppled from his saddle without a sound, gone before his body knew to fall. But one of the hired guns, the young blonde one who'd killed two Apache already, shot another warrior from 10 feet away. The Apache went down hard, clutching his stomach, and didn't move again. Into the cabin! I shouted to Kitchi, gesturing frantically. Cover! He understood immediately. Dying in the open was stupid. He barked orders, and the three remaining Apache warriors, Kitchi, Nidus, and one other, sprinted for my door. Bullets kicked up dust around their feet like deadly rain, but they made it. Kitchi took a bullet through the shoulder just as he reached the doorway. He stumbled but kept moving, face twisted with pain but silent. Chenoa grabbed him, half-dragged him inside. Now we were 7 inside the cabin. Me, Chenoa, Kitchi, Nidus, and one other Apache warrior whose name I didn't know. Outside, Malachi had 4 men left, Scar, the blonde killer, and 2 others whose faces I couldn't make out through the dust and gun smoke. Bad odds, but better than dying alone in the yard. Kitchi's shoulder was bleeding heavy. Chenoa was already moving, tearing strips from her shirt, packing the wound with desert sage she'd gathered days before. Apache medicine. She wrapped it tight while Kitchi gritted his teeth and refused to cry out. You'll live, Uncle, she said quietly. He grunted. Takes more than white man's bullet to kill old Kitchi. But I saw something new in his eyes when he looked at me now. Not friendship exactly, but respect. We'd bled together. That changed things between men. We shoot together, I said to everyone in the cabin, Apache and white alike. On my count, target the ones on horses first. Don't waste ammunition. Kitchi nodded. Even Nidus, who'd wanted me dead 5 minutes ago, gave a curt nod of agreement. 1, 2, 3. 7 rifles and bows fired at once through windows and cracks in the walls. Outside, 2 men screamed. Scar Maddox took a bullet through the chest and an arrow through the neck at the same instant. He slid from his horse like a sack of wet grain and lay twitching in the dirt until he stopped moving. One of the hired guns caught a bullet square in the face and toppled backward, gone before his body knew to fall. That left Malachi and two men, the blonde killer and one other. Malachi screamed at them to fall back, voice cracking with rage and frustration. They retreated toward the ridge, dragging their wounded, leaving Scar and the others where they'd fallen. But I wasn't letting them leave. Not this time. Not after 9 years. I'm going after him, I said, checking my revolver, making sure I had spare ammunition. You will die, Kitchi said flatly. Maybe. But if I don't end this now, he'll keep coming. He'll hunt your people. My people. Everyone. This ends today. Nita stepped forward, jaw set, eyes hard as flint. I go with you. I want blood from my brothers who died here. I looked at him, saw the same fury I'd carried for 9 years, understood it down to my bones. All right, I said. But when we find him, Malachi's mine. That's not negotiable. He nodded once. The others, I kill. We took 2 horses, mine and one of the Apache ponies that had scattered during the fight, rode hard toward Dead Man's Canyon, following the blood trail that led north into the rocks. I knew where Malachi would go. The place held meaning for both of us. The place where everything started, where my brother died and my life became this. Dead Man's Canyon looked exactly the same as it had 9 years ago, when I buried my brother there. Red stone walls rising on both sides like the ribs of some ancient beast, a dry creek bed snaking down the center, filled with smooth stones that would run with water maybe once a year if the rains came. Scrub brush and twisted Palo Verde trees clinging to life in the rocks. And there, beneath a crooked mesquite tree, the wooden cross I'd carved for Ezra. Weather-worn now, half buried in wind-blown sand, leaning at an angle like it was tired of standing. Malachi Cross stood beside it, waiting. His 2 remaining men lay dead 50 yards back along the trail. Nidis had put an arrow through one, clean shot through the eye. I'd shot the other when he tried to ambush us from behind a boulder. Now it was just Malachi, me, and the ghost of my brother watching from wherever the dead go. Fitting place to end this. Don't you think? Malachi called out, voice echoing off the canyon walls. Right where your baby brother took his last breath, crying for his mama. I dismounted slowly, boots hitting stone with a solid sound. Nidus stayed back, rifle ready but not interfering. This was personal. This was 9 years in the making. This was mine. Ezra told me not to waste my life hunting ghosts, I said, walking forward slow and steady, letting my voice carry. But you're not a ghost, Malachi. You're just a coward who hides behind other men and lets them die for your mistakes. He laughed and his face twisted with it, the deep scar tissue pulling at his features like something that crawled out of hell just to visit. Big words from a man who spent 9 years hiding in the desert like a whipped dog, too scared to face the world. I wasn't hiding, I said, still walking, closing the distance between us step by careful step. I was waiting for you to make a mistake big enough to give me a reason, and bringing that Apache woman to my door? That was it. That was the mistake that ends you. We stood 20 paces apart now. The sun was directly overhead, casting short shadows, making everything stark and clear and final. Malachi's hand hovered near his revolver. Mine did the same. The moment stretched like pulled wire, tight and humming with violence, about to break loose. You cost me an eye, Brennan, Malachi said, fingers tracing the deep groove that disfigured half his face. Cost me my looks, my reputation, my place in the world. After I kill you, I'm going back for that Apache girl, sell her to the highest bidder. Maybe the soldiers at Fort Hays. Maybe a whorehouse in Tucson. Either way, she'll spend the rest of her short life remembering that you died for nothing. You won't make it out of this canyon, I said. You're already dead. You just don't know it yet. We'll see about that. The moment stretched. Wind whistled through the rocks. A raven called from somewhere high above, black wings against blue sky. Then Malachi moved. His hand flashed to his gun, fingers wrapping around walnut grip, pulling it up and out in one smooth motion. Fast. Faster than I expected after 9 years of wondering. But I'd been ready for this moment since the day I buried Ezra. My Remington cleared leather first. Hammer back, barrel level, front sight finding center mass. We fired at the same instant. Two shots that sounded like one, echoing off canyon walls like the judgment of God. His bullet hit my left shoulder. White-hot pain exploded through muscle and bone. The impact spun me halfway around. I stumbled back a step, nearly fell, caught myself. My bullet hit him dead center, just below the sternum. Malachi's eyes went wide with shock and something that might have been understanding. He looked down at the spreading red stain on his shirt, watched his own blood soak through the fabric, then looked back up at me. You! He tried to raise his gun again, hands shaking, refusing to accept that this was over. I shot him a second time. This one took him in the chest, right through the heart, spinning him around like a child's toy. He fell to his knees beside Ezra's grave, gun slipping from fingers that no longer worked. I walked forward, shoulders screaming with every step, blood running hot down my arm inside my shirt, stood over him, blocking out the sun, casting shadow across his dying face. "This is for Ezra," I said, voice steady despite the pain. "And for every innocent life you destroyed because you thought you could. And for making me spend 9 years alone because I was too afraid to face what you'd turn me into." I put the third bullet in his head. He fell forward into the dust and lay still. Blood pooled beneath him, soaking into the same ground where my brother's blood had soaked 9 years before. Justice, revenge, whatever you wanted to call it, it was done. Nidus came up beside me, saw the blood on my shoulder, the way I was swaying on my feet. "You need medicine," he said. "I'll live," I said. "Let's go home." We rode back to the cabin as the sun began its slow descent toward the western ridge. Chinoa cleaned my shoulder wound while Kitchi watched from the cot where he was resting his own injury. The bullet had passed straight through muscle without hitting bone. Agonizing but survivable. She packed it with herbs, wrapped it tight with strips of cloth, worked with the steady hands of someone who'd done this before. "You'll have scar," she said. "Good. I'll match my brother's ghost." Kitchi spoke then, voice rough but clear. "You fight with honor today, Colt Brennan. You saved my niece twice. You killed the enemy of my people. By the law of Chief Ahiga, you are friend to the Redstone Apache. This is not given lightly." "I don't need friendship," I said, though that wasn't quite true anymore. "I just need you to let her stay here until she's ready to go home on her own terms." Chinoa looked at me, then at her uncle. "I want to stay. Few more weeks. Make sure his shoulder heals proper. Make sure no more men come looking for trouble." Nita started to argue, but Kitchi raised one hand, silencing him. "Ahiga will decide. We return to camp tomorrow. Tell him everything that happened here. He will come himself to see this man who fought beside his children." 2 days later, they left, took their dead with them, wrapped in blankets, to be buried in the traditional way in the hidden places where the Redstone Apache had buried their warriors for generations. Before they rode out, Kitchi's shoulder was healing clean, the herbs and rest doing their work. He gripped my forearm in the way warriors do. "You saved my life in that cabin," he said. "I don't forget debts." "We're even," I said. "You fought beside me." He shook his head slowly. "Not even, never even. You are blood brother now. That means something." He rode off, straight back despite the wound, leaving me standing in front of my cabin with questions I couldn't answer yet. 7 weeks passed like water flowing over stone. Chinoa stayed, not in my cabin, I built her a small shelter nearby out of salvaged wood and canvas, gave her privacy and space. We didn't talk much, didn't need to. She'd cook sometimes, Apache recipes with corn and wild herbs and desert plants I didn't know the names of. I'd hunt, bring back deer or rabbit or quail. We'd eat together in the evening, sitting on the porch, watching the sun go down over the ridge in silence that felt comfortable now instead of empty. It wasn't romance, wasn't love or courtship or any of those complicated things that tie people together and tear them apart. It was something simpler and maybe more valuable. Respect, understanding, the kind of connection forged in blood and bullets in shared survival. When Chief Ahiga finally arrived with 15 warriors, painted for ceremony instead of war, I thought it might be my last day on Earth. But the old chief, gray-haired, weathered like ancient leather, with eyes that had seen too much death and not enough peace, just looked at me for a long, measuring moment that seemed to stretch into eternity. "My daughter speaks of your courage," he said finally, voice like distant thunder. "You are welcome in my camp, white man. But I ask now, and you will answer true, do you want her to stay, or does she return with me to her people?" I looked at Chenoa. She looked back, dark eyes unreadable. "That's not my choice to make," I said. "It's hers. Ask her." Chenoa stepped forward, stood between her father and me, between two worlds that rarely found common ground. "Father, I return with you. My place is with our people. But I ask one thing. This man is brother to us now, proven in blood. If he needs help, we come. If we need help, he comes. This is the way it should be." Ahiga nodded slowly, processing this. Then he did something I didn't expect. He walked to his horse and untied something from the saddle, a rope leading to another horse, led the animal forward. Sierra, my bay mare, the one scar and his men had taken that first night. "We found her in Malachi's camp," Ahiga said, handing me the rope. "She belongs to you. We return what is yours." I took the reins. Sierra nuzzled my good shoulder, the one that wasn't bandaged and aching, and made a soft sound in her throat like she was glad to be home. "Thank you," I said, and meant it deeper than words could carry. Ahiga clasped my forearm in a grip that was strong despite his age. "You have my word, Colt Brennan, and my respect. That is not given lightly or taken back easily. Remember this." They left at dawn the next day, 15 warriors and one woman riding into the rising sun. Chenoa stopped before mounting her horse, looked back at me standing there with Sierra beside me, shoulders still healing, beard grown out, looking like I'd survived something that should have killed me. "Maybe I visit sometime," she said, voice carrying just far enough. "Bring food. Make sure you don't die of loneliness or infection or your own stubborn pride." I almost smiled. Almost. "Maybe you should." She swung up onto her horse in one smooth motion, gave me one last look, then rode away with her people. Dust rose behind them, caught the morning light, turned gold and red before settling back to earth. I stood in front of my cabin with Sierra beside me and watched them disappear into the desert that stretched forever in all directions. For 9 years I'd been alone. Thought I wanted it that way. Thought isolation was the same thing as peace. But sometimes a debt comes along that changes everything. Sometimes the person you save ends up saving you in ways you can't measure or understand until much later. I went inside, poured coffee that was too hot and too strong, sat at the table where Ezra used to sit across from me and tell stories about places we'd go someday. "I kept my promise," I said to the empty chair, to the ghost that had lived in this cabin for 9 years. "Didn't waste my life hunting you, and I didn't let anyone die when I could stop it. That count for something?" The chair didn't answer, but I felt lighter somehow, like a weight I'd been carrying had finally been set down. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain from distant mountains that might bring water to the desert if we were lucky. Somewhere out there, Chinoa rode with her people, free and alive. Malachi Cross rotted in an unmarked grave in Dead Man's Canyon, food for coyotes and ravens. And I was still here, still breathing, still carrying the weight of promises kept and debts paid in full. They say the West has three things that kill a man fastest: snakes in the dark, stray bullets with no name, and debts you never knew you owed. I'd paid all three and lived to tell about it, and somehow, against all odds and reason, I was still standing.